on, vinyl community? Welcome to another video with the Record Spinner. In today's video, I am going to be ranking the Led Zeppelin studio catalog. Led Zeppelin is one of the most loved and most respected rock bands ever, and ranking a catalog such as theirs is quite daunting because their albums got characteristically different as they evolved, and they all included amazing tunes, and I had to kind of base it on the big picture that is Zeppelin's legacy and what made them so great and highly regarded. But also, on the other hand, their catalog isn't quite as extensive as some of their contemporaries, so it was somewhat easy to do at the same time. Let me preface by saying that this ranking is solely my opinion. It is neither right or wrong. If you think In Through the Outdoor is the greatest Led Zeppelin album of all time, then I respect your opinion. So enough of the chit-chat, let's jump into what this video is all about. There are 9 Led Zeppelin studio albums, and coming in at number 9 at the bottom of the barrel is this one. You guys saw this coming, 1982's Coda. This was a contractual obligation. After John Bonham had passed away, they still owed Atlantic Records one more album, so Jimmy Page went through the vault, pulled out some tracks that were not released, and just put together this album. It's honestly avoidable if you're a casual fan, but if you're a diehard, then I guess this is worth seeking. There are some interesting things on here. You get things like We're Gonna Groove and I Can't Quit You Baby from the Royal Albert Hall show from 1970. Poor Tom, which is a outtake from Led Zeppelin III. You get a thing called Bonzo's Montreux, which is like a synthesized drum solo from John Bonham. It's a nice way to kind of, shine a light on him since he did unfortunately pass away in 1980. Thus, the band essentially ended. But the highlight of this album is one of the outtakes from the In Through the Outdoor sessions. It's a song called Wearing and Tearing. It's almost like Led Zeppelin goes punk. It is so frantic and unlike anything they've done. Who knows if they were to continue in that direction for their next album. Apparently, Jimmy Page has said that if the band was to continue after In Through the Outdoor, he wanted to kind of get back and do a much heavier album. So who really knows? But yeah, in all honesty, if you're a diehard fan, definitely check it out at some point. But if you're a casual listener, avoid this at all costs. Coming in at number 8 is this album, 1979's In Through the Outdoor. As you can see here, the album comes in a brown paper bag. Album comes out just like this, and there's like several different variants of the album artwork where you have the different perspectives of the people featured on the sleeve. So for this album, you essentially have John Paul Jones and Robert Plant in the driver's seat. Jimmy Page had kind of withdrawn a little bit. So there is a bit of an emphasis on keyboards and synthesizers on this album. But nonetheless, there are some awesome tracks on here. The big notable ones are In the Evening and All My Love, which is a beautiful track that Robert wrote for his son Carrick, who passed away a couple years before this album came out. There's also Fool in the Rain, which is has been overplayed by classic rock radio. I can't stand hearing it. Hot Dog, which is like, Zeppelin does rockabilly. Kind of doesn't fit, but the big highlight on this album is the 10-minute track Carouselambra. Great synth work from John Paul Jones, and Jimmy Page just delivers some great guitar textures. It's a really awesome piece. Who knows if maybe they would have done more of those epics if they would have continued into the 80s, but it's a rather interesting record, but when you rank it up to the others, it just does not really match up a whole too much. Coming in at number 7 is this album, 1976's Presence. Now, this is an album that a lot of people love. I am for sure one of them. I think this is a criminally underrated Zeppelin album, but I do feel that some parts of this album are a bit undercooked in places. So the story goes is that in the summer of 75, they were supposed to do another American tour. Robert Plant gets into a car accident. He's in a wheelchair. The tour does not happen. But Jimmy Page wanted to take advantage of the time off and go into the studio and cut another album. And it's been said many times that this album was done in a matter of 3 weeks, which is crazy considering the scale of their other albums. But the results, you got some amazing tracks on here, such as Achilles' Last Stand, which is a great opener. There's like a Jimmy Page guitar orchestra running throughout that entire piece. Nobody's Fault But Mine. For Your Life is a really cool tune. And then you get some other interesting things like T for One, which is kind of like Since I've Been Loving You Part 2. And then you get some rather quirkier tunes like Candy Store Rock and Royal Orleans, some rather interesting tracks. This is a very guitar-driven album, but I do recommend checking out the deluxe CD edition. They also done a deluxe vinyl edition. There's a track on here called Pod, which is a John Paul Jones piano ballad, which definitely would not have fit the overall theme of this album, but it's one of the most beautiful Led Zeppelin ballads that I personally have ever heard. It's definitely worth checking out. It would have been so out of place on this, but it is a great song. But yeah, it's an album, like I said, gets a lot of love. I'm a huge fan of it, but I don't know, something's missing. I think if a little bit more time was put into this, it would perhaps be a little bit higher in my ranking. Coming in at number 6 is this album. Isn't it sacrilege to have this album kind of low in this ranking? The first album, Led Zeppelin I from 1969. The album that started it all. Jimmy Page has said so many times that this album was so avant-garde for its time that it completely changed things. And I can agree, because with an opener like Good Times, Bad Times, how could you even follow up that? It's absolutely crazy. You also have a lot of real bluesy kind of tunes like I Can't Quit You Baby, You Shook Me, and then of course you have other things on here like Babe I'm Gonna Leave You, Dazed and Confused, Communication Breakdown, How Many More Times, you know, just real early Zeppelin bluesy standards. But in this phase in Zeppelin's career, they're doing what they did best. They did a lot of blues covers, a little bit of stealing here and there, so it's just kind of a snapshot of where they were at the time. But then again, this album is extremely important and crucial to the band's career because literally, you know, when they did this album, they went to America and they almost had success just given to them because there was so much hype built around this band, considering the reputations that Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones had as session players. And then, of course, having Robert Plant and John Bonham in the band. It's a diabolical mixture of amazingness. And it's a great record, but when you rack it up to everything else, you know, it just simply exists as a sort of snapshot at where they were at the time, and as it's kind of a basis in terms of how they could evolve and grow from there. Coming in at number 5 is this album, 1973's Houses of the Holy. This, I think, is Zeppelin's most experimental album in terms of all the genres they were kind of tapping into with this record. You have the very rocking opener, The Song Remains the Same, which apparently was going to be an instrumental piece called The Overture. And I think that really would have worked well, considering how Jimmy Page's guitar work is just spread all over that track. But Robert Plant was very quick to write lyrics and then turned it into The Song Remains the Same. You have the very progressive rock sounding, beautiful Rain song with the very intricate guitar work and the mellotrons. So lush and so beautiful. You have Over the Hills and Far Away, which has a great acoustic guitar intro, a recognizable riff too, I should say. Then you get to the Crunge, which is like a James Brown funk kind of thing. I know a lot of people aren't real fans of that song. I'm one of them. I think if they swapped it with something else, this album would have been pure gold. Then you get to classic Zeppelin territory with things such as Dancing Days and The Ocean. You have the reggae, Jamaican-style Jamaica, which is quite enjoyable. It's something completely left field for Zeppelin, but I do like it. And then you get to John Paul Jones's masterpiece, No Quarter, which is just absolutely amazing sounding. Robert Plant has this really eerie effect going on with his vocals. And then you have lyrics such as this. Walking side by side with death, the devil mocks their every step. The snow drives back the foot that's slow. The dogs of doom are howling more. It's giving King Crimson's Epitaph a run for its money in terms of some of the greatest well-written rock lyrics. This album is just absolutely adventurous in every sense. Coming in at number 4 is this album, 1970's Led Zeppelin III. This, of course, features the rather infamous pinwheel to the album cover, and you have the die-cut circles there that change every time you spin the wheel, which is pretty cool. You don't see too many of these pop up in terms of newer album artworks. This is my favorite Led Zeppelin album, and it's also one of the most radically different Led Zeppelin albums since it is their acoustic album. So Jimmy and Robert went to this cottage by the English countryside called Bron Rar to write songs for this album. And considering that the cottage had no electricity, no running water, it kind of just gave the album a very sort of earthy kind of tone to it, stripped down, acoustic, and it's absolutely beautiful. I love it when Led Zeppelin unplugs the guitars and goes pure natural acoustic. And aside from the tracks on here that are acoustic, which I'll get into in a minute, you do have some great rockin' Zeppelin tunes that you would easily come to find on other Zeppelin albums, such as The Immigrant Song, Celebration Day, the bluesy highlight, which is Since I've Been Loving You. But the acoustic influence really plays in with things such as like Friends, Gallows Pole, Tangerine, That's the Way, which is probably Robert Plant's greatest set of lyrics. Bron Rar Stomp, hats off to Roy Harper. Just a really great stripped down Zeppelin album, and like I said, it is my all-time favorite. Coming in at number 3 is this album, 1971's Led Zeppelin IV, or the untitled fourth album, Zoso, Symbols, however you want to call it. This album is essentially a greatest hits album because you have things such as Black Dog, Rock and Roll, Battle of Evermore, Misty Mountain Hop, Going to California, When the Levee Breaks, and of course the big number on here being Stairway to Heaven. If you play the guitar riff at a Guitar Center, you will get thrown out. They recorded this album on location at a place called Headley Grange, which was kind of off to the countryside a little bit. They didn't have to really work within the constraints of a traditional studio in the city, and it was just a bit more of a freeing kind of recording atmosphere, and it just comes across a bit more natural on this record, because you have John Bonham's amazing drum sound on When the Levee Breaks, where he kind of set up in the corridor of the place, and the sound just echoes everywhere. There's no way you could possibly record that in a conventional studio without running filters and effects and such. It's an absolutely amazing natural sound. You also have special guest vocals on Battle of Evermore by Sandy Denny of Fairport Convention. She sings on that track. Rock and Roll includes some piano work by Rolling Stones pianist Ian Stewart, who also plays on a track called Boogie with Stu, which we will get to later on. Just an absolutely fantastic record. It has so much momentum. Some can easily put this at number 1, and honestly, I wouldn't fight them because it is definitely all killer, no filler. But however, at the number 2 spot has to be this album. It is indeed the Brown Bomber, 1969's Led Zeppelin II. Recorded at multiple locations in England and America during the band's American tour, this album is the quintessential hard rock blues album. You have things such as Whole Lotta Love, which was a huge hit for the band in the States, has that crazy atmospheric middle section with the theremin going in and out. Absolutely crazy stuff. What Is and What Should Never Be. The Lemon Song, which is this great bluesy jam. A beautiful ballad called Thank You, which I have a lot of fondness for. I remember I was at my cousin's wedding, and that was the first song that they danced to as husband and wife, which was the coolest thing ever. Heartbreaker, Living Loving Maid, which even though Jimmy Page is not huge on that particular song, it works so well that most times when classic rock radio stations will play Heartbreaker, it will go right into Living Loving Maid. Ramble On, which has some pretty cool acoustic guitar work with the bongos. Moby Dick, which is John Bonham's shining moment on this record. And then you have the bluesy Bring It On Home, which starts out very mellow with the filtered vocals and the harmonica. And then Jimmy Page just rips right in with the main riff. Absolutely killer album. This is another one that could have easily fit at the number 1 spot. And hell, I even consider putting this at number 1. But honestly, at the number 1 spot is their magnum opus. 1975's Physical Graffiti. In terms of creativity, this album is the peak. This album includes everything you would want and love on a Led Zeppelin record. You have the bluesy In My Time of Dying, the funky Trampled Underfoot, the epic Kashmir, which is probably the greatest thing that they ever worked up. The very progressive rock sounding In the Light, which has the drone that runs in the beginning with the synth work done by John Paul Jones. The beautiful ballad 10 Years Gone, and then rockers such as Custard Pie, The Wonton Song, and Sick Again. And when the band got together at Headley Grange in 74 to work up the material that I just mentioned, it was too long for a single album, but not enough for a double. So the band went back and pulled out some songs that were recorded and worked on for sessions for like Led Zeppelin III, Led Zeppelin IV, and Houses of the Holy, and put them on this record. And it's kind of interesting because Jimmy Page has always said that when you look at the songs that were featured on those 3 albums, you could never swap one song out for the other. I kind of disagree with that, but what's important is they found a home on this album. So you have things like The Rover and the song Houses of the Holy, which come from the Houses of the Holy sessions. You also have the acoustic piece called Bron Rar, which was recorded during the Zeppelin III sessions. It's a beautiful, small acoustic guitar piece by Jimmy Page. It has one of my favorite Led Zeppelin songs ever, which is Down by the Seaside, which was from Led Zeppelin IV. Just a beautiful kind of folky, just mellow kind of tune. So great. Then you have some really great spontaneous moments, such as like Boogie with Stu, with, like I just mentioned, for Led Zeppelin IV, Ian Stewart played on Rock and Roll, and then he also played on that track, which obviously bears his last name, Boogie with Stu. Then you also have things like Night Flight, which is from Led Zeppelin IV, Black Country Woman, which was recorded in the garden at Stargroves for Houses of the Holy. You hear Eddie Kramer, the producer, say, "There's a plane rolling by. Do you want me to take it out?" And Robert Plant goes, "Nah, leave it." It's so great. This album has so many wonderful gems. It's them at their creative peak, and it is, in my humble opinion, their greatest album ever. So there you guys go. That is my ranking of the Led Zeppelin studio catalog. What is your Led Zeppelin studio catalog ranking like? Please let me know down in the comment section below. I'd love to know. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to support this channel, be sure to check me out on Patreon. See you guys in the next video, and most importantly, keep the records spinning.